Everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Pull Up Trey podcast, or Pull Up Kate Pad. Oh, I know you hate Kate. Pull Up
No, I
Caitlin
like
podcast.
Kate.
You prefer Kate or like Kate?
My family calls me Kate.
I am also a Sam.
We've talked
I've,
about this many
yes.
times.
Oh wow, we are retreading. Also, the Raptors retreaded in that they have had success winning games and taking advantage of certain lineups with Scottie Barnes playing the five because he is a very aggressive, very physically imposing player and can do so against bigger men than himself. The Raptors use him to the effect of 122 points over the Pacers 104. They win, back in the win column, doing their thing. Caitlin Cooper is here to discuss the Raptors, their game against the Pacers, and a little bit of basketball at large. Caitlin, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Samson Folk.
Mm,
Thank you for inviting me back to talk to the Raptors Republic audience about a game where I don't always expect very good things to happen to the Indiana Pacers against the Toronto Raptors. As I've said many times, this isn't a particularly good matchup for them, but I did enjoy watching Scottie Barnes. I thought he did a lot of really special things in this game, particularly as a defender. I liked some of the things that I got to see from CMB, who's one of my other favorite players to watch until he re-injured his thumb.
mm-hmm.
That was a good time to be had by all. And then one of the many players from the state of Indiana who was traded that you just acquired also had a double double in 15 minutes?
Yep. It was the second half. I was walking in the tunnel, and James Wade, I saw him. I hadn't seen him in a little while, and I was like, "Hey, how's it going, man?" He's like, "Oh, it's going all right. Better after we get this comeback." He felt pretty good about the tweaks they made at halftime. The Raptors demolished them in the third quarter, and again, largely behind the strength of Scottie Barnes, who is an all-star again. So I asked Darko this, and I'm very excited to read you this quote. I asked Darko about, I prepped it as, hey, so I imagine a lot of coaching is trying to put together lineups that, create stronger strengths and limit weaknesses. And he said, we have no weaknesses. I said, ha ha ha, yes, very good. But all the same, Scottie Barnes allows you to play different type of front court minutes and all this kind of stuff. So he says, a little bit of rambling. Yes, Scottie is Defensive Player of the Year. He's an all-star. He's going to be a Finals MVP. He's going to be an MVP one day. Write down the date I said that. So that is February 8th, 2026. What do you make of Scottie Barnes as the tweak that helped the Raptors run away in this game, and also his potential as an MVP of the NBA?
Yeah, I mean, I think the game mainly changed with about 2 minutes to play in the second quarter when the Pacers had 3 turnovers in a row. And the standout possession from that little spurt, which is usually what leads to a Raptors tidal wave of sorts, is forcing turnovers, was watching Scottie Barnes guarding TJ McConnell above the break and turning him multiple times. And what was frustrating about that is that nobody went and screened, of course, but also that Pascal Siakam was being fronted by Jamal Shed, and no one did a high-low flash because the Pacers were closing that half with Cam Jones on the floor. And Cam Jones was the first guard off the bench in this game, and Cam Jones, they were running a lot of actions for him to attack to his right as a very left-hand dominant guard. So that should kind of tell you about the priorities for the Pacers in this game. But that doesn't take anything away from the fact that Scottie was very special, being able to contain TJ McConnell, who leads the NBA in drives per 100 possessions. That's not an easy task to contain him, even though TJ is 33 years old. And then that cascaded into after halftime, where the Raptors made their adjustment to play Scottie Barnes at the five, and that small lineup gave the Pacers significant trouble for a number of reasons. I'm imagining that the Pacers will probably go back and watch that film and see all of the different areas where they could perhaps have pinpointed Emmanuel Quickley a little bit better than they did at attacking those particular mismatches. But even then, to cap this off, a very special Scottie Barnes possession, blocking Andrew Nemhard at the rim out of a stack pick and roll. The Pacers went to that specifically because they thought they were going to get Andrew Nemhard switched onto Emmanuel Quickley jumping out off the stack screen, and didn't matter. Nemhard got the step on quickly, but Scottie Barnes was behind him to back it up. So I thought it was one of the better. I mean, I've seen a lot of Scottie Barnes really special
Mm-hmm.
defensive performances, and it's not like the Pacers are an offensive juggernaut, but many of the plays, the diversity of the defensive playmaking that he made, if he's not on the Defensive Player of the Year ballot, I think we as the media have failed Scottie Barnes and the Toronto Raptors.
So 2 steals, 4 blocks. One of the blocks, as you mentioned, the one on Nemhard. One of the steals fronting Pascal, I believe is the Pacers'
Yeah.
first play of the second half. A back down on now injured Johnny Furphy, drop step dunk. a perfectly paced transition possession to find Brandon Ingram for a layup, a 5 or 6 possession string across maybe 8 possessions of him kind of deciding what happens for the Raptors and for the Pacers. Really effective, really dominant, and a player who I don't think he'll be an MVP, but I have been someone who has championed his game and his all star potential and I think all NBA potential, largely featuring unbelievable defense. The Raptors, I think the first thing I want to talk to you about is I don't think Raptors fans are super interested about a game against the Pacers, who Pascal played 24 minutes. As you mentioned, Cam Jones being directed towards his weaknesses in the, at least from my perspective, in terms of trying to get him to develop, the Pacers focusing on that as a whole. The Raptors have a roster here that is complementary in some sense and ill-fitting in another. Jakob Pertl's return looms large. His contract looms large. His presence on the team looms large as an actual good player, but one who has strengths that need to be serviced and weaknesses that need to be papered over. I give you homework, Caitlin, on the Raptors' front court situation going forward. I'm going to open it up to you now. I won't even frame a question, just on what I asked you, the future of the Raptors front court and building a team around Scottie as it's currently constructed. What are your thoughts?
To clarify, Samson told me to watch film approximately 25 to 30 minutes, which was not 25 to 30 minutes, of Jakob Pertl, Scottie Barnes, and Brandon Ingram. So I do not find the offensive rating and defensive rating for these three players when they are on the court to be particularly meaningful, mainly because the defensive rating is quite poor. Bottom
Hmm.
five equivalency when they're out there. And I think based on what I poked around at, that is mainly because Jakob Pertl did not look like himself. And also because Jakob Pertl, when he was playing, his games mainly coincided with when the team was struggling defensively too. Now maybe those two things kind of go hand in hand to a part too, because
He,
if he's brittle, your defense probably isn't going to look very good. But we've talked about the pressure and other things in the past. So throwing those numbers out the window, what is somewhat interesting to me among the three things, and we can talk about each player individually if you would like, but starting with Brandon Ingram, is that his pick and roll frequency, picks per 100, is the lowest it's been of his
Mhm.
career. And it's not particularly efficient either. And so, between these people, do you want to talk about Brandon Ingram's two-man combinations and why they go with which ones?
Okay, so I will, before you dive into this with what you found, what Lewis and I just did in the short amounts of film room that we did was I was asking why can't the Raptors, look to Scotty and Bi a little bit more, and we were looking at what the Raptors can do offensively that has worked in the past in smaller amounts of volume, and how they can try and like scale that up. But sitting at the front of all of this was Jakob Pertl returning, Colin Murray Boyle's presence, affecting these two-man lineups, because I'm very envious of the Pacers finals run I covered, where at the end of every game the Pacers are like, we're going to put Tyrese and Pascal in actions together, and that creates a lot of tension in the defense. So we're looking at how do we make this happen, and the answers weren't sexy and they weren't easy, and there is things to get around. Where do you land on duos, twosomes?
So what I found while I was looking at it is looking at his time with the Pelicans, his most effective, actually of his career, his most effective screening combinations, minimum 100 picks, was Brandon as the ball handler or CJ McCollum or Lonzo as the screener. And what you just said is telling, because if you're using inverted with Brandon and Scotty and Jakob Pertl are both out also on the court, there's not a lot of places where you're going to put both of those people that are going to be conducive to Brandon attacking out of those inverted actions. Hence why they basically don't occur and are not effective at all when Emmanuel Quickley or Jamal Shed screens for Brandon Ingram. So that kind of gets ruled out. He's effective with CMB and Pirtle. And despite the fact that I said Pirtle has looked kind of brittle in some of these games, I think the rationale behind that one is, and especially because, not to bring up the Pacers, but Brandon Ingram has fried the Pacers for many years. And part of the reason why is because they didn't have a lot of wing size wings. But even once they had Pascal, if it was like a Zion Brandon pick and roll, the Pacers wouldn't switch it. Like they would have Pascal chase over, and then the big would stay underneath Zion to make sure that he didn't slip. And so Brandon's just pulling up over smaller guys or with Pascal running into contact in a lot of those games. And those groups for New Orleans were effective. But then when you look at it and you're like, well, why wouldn't Brandon and Scottie work in that same way? Zion makes way more screen contact, and opponents would switch way less, probably because he made more screen contact than what's the case when Brandon and Scottie are a two-man screening combination. So it kind of lands on that one. And then I've also seen some possessions, like I kind of made that comment about Cam Jones, but kind of like to know when you're mixing in CMB and Pirtle, this doesn't apply to quite as much. But I saw some possessions where they tried, to do an empty between Brandon and Scottie. Scottie gets switched onto a smaller player, and then CMB doesn't really seem like he has a great feel for where to flash into those spaces to find the open gaps. And I don't know if it's because of the thumb injury or what, but he seems very hesitant to actually be looking at the rim a lot of times when he's catching the ball. But Brandon's seeing more switch this year in terms of his overall frequency on every single pick. And that might be too why CMB is a little bit better partner for him. One, he's playing a lot of center, so he's bringing the five up to Brandon, and Brandon's going to be able to shoot into that gap. But also, CMB is the hot stove king, right? So
Hmm.
if you're seeing more switch, he's going to be able to shove off into the middle of the court a little bit too. So once I looked at all this, it might make some sense. I wondered tonight, since they put Scottie Barnes at the five, I was like, will we see more Brandon and Scottie pick and roll in the second half of this game? And we in fact did once. And I was like, they could go to that a little bit more because obviously the floor is better spaced when you don't have Pirtle or CMB out there, but they ran like a ram screen to get Scottie up to the ball, which delayed Pascal getting there, and then, or to Brandon, I mean, and then it was actually creating an over coverage to get downhill rather than just going to the automatic switch as far as when Brandon's the ball handler.
So this was in looking back at Pascal and Scotty pick and rolls. A lot of times we're looking at five out, obviously, because they want to create room. Uh, Even this year, Scotty and Brandon, when they run it, a lot of times it'll be when Sandro's on the floor, not when CMB is out there. CMB, a lot of times it'll be in these transitional bench lineups where they have shooters out there. When you look at how the Raptors offense goes, if you go into on-offs and you say, why do they score worse when Brandon Ingram is out there despite him being absolutely essential to what they do? It's because of these unique packages and this uniquely built roster. What you and I did over on your channel and for your website, Basketball She Wrote, Patreon, was we tried to make sense of how this huge change from Miles Turner to Ivica Zubac, because this year's a development year, it's worth noting. How do the Pacers make this big jump while radically changing their front court? I'm curious if you think that there's a jump available for the Raptors while keeping it relatively the same, and Jakob actually has maybe not as high of highs as Zubac does, but similar weaknesses and some similar strengths.
Like, are they leaving meat on the bone right now? Is that what you're asking me
Yeah,
effectively?
yeah.
There are some of the actions that I think work really well with all of them. I like when they run Quickley, Scotty, empty, because then that draws somebody to the nail against Quickley because he's a pull-up threat. And then
Hmm.
you also have the option to fire it into the step up between Brandon and Jakob Pertl. I can't I can't query what the results are on those specifics, but my eye test tells me that that's pretty effective. And then the last time I was on the podcast, when I told you how much I liked it when they were running the empty actions between Scotty and RJ Barrett, and then firing it into step up screens with a Quickley and Jakob, because Quickley draws two to the ball. Jakob can get into the roll, and then they were cutting Scotty very strategically to the strong side dunker spot, which I won't go into the specifics. If people want to look at it, they can. But that's a very unique alignment to be creating last spacing. And I do like a lot of what Scotty does in the dunker spot, to be quite honest. Like, I don't know
Hmm.
how he personally feels about it, if he feels like he's being stashed there or not, but I think it creates unique spacing alignments, and he has such great vision. And he's so quick at making those passes, those short read passes right around the basket, that I actually think some of that can be pretty special. And then I do think too, like, I don't know how you think about it, but when I watch a lot of their Iverson clips and Brandon comes off the Iverson action, you could have that's like an area where the two-man game might really work, because Scotty can follow Brandon after he comes off the two Iversons at the elbows, and then he could potentially slip out of that or hit and hold depending upon what the coverage is. But they don't often run that when they're all three out there. And then I think that they need to keep Jakob Pertl high so that they have the option once again to reverse it into the step up with Quickley and Pertl. but they'll often have Pirtle in the dunker, which really feels like it's cramping the spacing to me. Like, I just like the ability and offenses to switch sides of the floor as many times as you can if need be, while shifting the nail defender. A lot of what the NBA is about right now is the war at the nail. That's why you're
Hmm.
seeing a lot of the wheel actions that the Raptors run around stuff. So that might be something that I look at. I mean, Pirtle being healthy is certainly the biggest part of this. And I mean, I would like to see more inverted for Scottie too. I don't know where you
Yeah.
land on that, but
So when I think about maximizing Scottie's offense, I think about, and again, the big consideration here is how does Scottie view himself? What is he buying into?
yeah.
Am I being stashed? Am I dominating? Is this a cool way for me to score points? Scottie needs time every game, sometime, I think, where he is the five, and you just go pick and roll and see what happens with that. Let him catch on the move because I watched all of his finishes. Even though he is not very good at maintaining the passing windows, even though he's not very good at pacing, he can catch with his feet together, like as if he's doing a balance drill, and can still spring out of that and finish at the rim. It's just as long as it hits his hands. It's a lot different than the relative polish of a guy like Jakob. He's just such a svelte roller. But Scottie being able to do that is important in transitional lineups. That's why he and Jamal Shed work quite well together. I do want to see more inverted stuff with Scottie on ball. It's meaningful, it's good, it's important, especially since he is so just passing him from a high point. If the defense responds any which way, the skips are so easy for him. Checkdowns are so easy for him. And I think keeping Jakob high as the screener and Scottie low as the guy to navigate, the murky underbelly of like the defense as a dunker spot guy, that makes a lot of sense to me. But hypotheticals on what players should be doing don't always jive with what players want to be doing and what I guess coaches envision. But that's kind of what I thought about that. And yeah, Brandon, the pick and roll stuff, I really do wonder how that, I guess, settles in once Jakob is back. And presumably after having, at that point, like 2 full months off, hopefully feeling good and spry. But these things are tough. I don't know. There's not always answers to this stuff, at least not from where we sit.
And then the Jakob stuff too, because there's other ways, like, because some of these combinations aren't going to be effective when you really think about it.
Hmm.
Because Scottie screening for Brandon, it's like, okay, well, I mean, Brandon screening for Scottie. Like, part of the reason you sign Brandon is so that Brandon's taking the tougher defensive assignments, right? So
Yep.
you're kind of you're working counterproductively to what you're trying to achieve for the overall vision of the team if you go that way. So that one doesn't make a lot of sense, but Scottie and Jakob Pertl pick and rolls don't make a lot of sense either because teams switch them way too much, and then it's just asking Scottie to be creating against a big or his own matchup in isolation. So I do like it when they play them out of horns. You know, the popular LeBron play. The Pacers also, Mather had this comment about, LeBron's going to have to show me that he's better than me. Like, they ran that for Matherin a lot too. So you can have Scottie and Jakob both at each an elbow, and then like Jamal Shed gives it to Scottie. Jamal Shed cuts off of Scottie's shoulder so that creates a little bit of a gap off of Scottie, and then you get the screen from Jakob at the other elbow, and then that gives Scottie a head of steam downhill in a very short space. I really like that, but they don't go to it too much. So there are certain things that I'm like, it's interesting because obviously you watch this team and you know them way better than I do. I actually thought the offense could be a little bit better than what it was when we did the one ahead of preseason. I was like, I think there's some stuff here where this could work a little bit better. And as it turns out, I was skeptical about the defense because of what I had seen of the scheme. And then the defense got tremendously good, and the offense is still sputtering in part because this team inexplicably cannot make 3-point shots. So
Yes. So that's okay. I want to talk a little bit about Emmanuel Quickley, which I didn't send you for homework on, but I think your at a blush opinions are good. Actually, I want to ask you because you did this to me. You would put me in the I'm holding hand cream, by the
I
way.
was like,
It's
what's
for
going on?
it was in my field of view. Anyway, no free press, no free press. So you asked me about Miles Turner and the future of it all, and I was like, I think you could get away from Miles Turner, and it could end up benefiting the team. What do you think about Jakob Poeltl, even though he's signed for forever into the future? The Raptors going forward with Scottie Barnes, is he your ideal center?
I think back to the quote that Darko gave you, I think, at media day when you asked him about what the differences would be between Scottie working with Pascal and Scottie working with Brandon. And didn't Darko say the difference is they'll be playing with Mamu?
Yeah, he did.
So it kind of makes me think, like, obviously he felt better about the combination because he thought there was going to be more space on the floor. And you and I are probably a little bit lower on spacing bigs in general. And some of this has changed in the NBA because a lot of it, like, the myth of the stretch five, the myth of what you actually accomplish when you're a stretch five popping doesn't open driving lanes to the degree that it does. A lot of times defenses now, it's not what it was when Roy Hibbert played against Pero Antich, where Pero Antich was destroying the Pacers, making threes because he couldn't get out there to contest. Now people are like, well, if Pero Antich beats us making threes, I guess he does. Like, we're going to keep the defense focused on plugging the drives. So, but there are ways with stretch bigs, which I'm sure that's probably why Scottie's numbers look so good when he was out there in combinations with Mamu early in the season. Is, you can put them in the strong side corner and put guards in the dunker spot. You can position them at the weak side wing, and then you're making a lower defender be the low man, and they're having to be guarded by a guard. Which, by the way, in this game, what was going on with people who couldn't score against, like, TJ McConnell as the low man and Andrew Nemhart as the low
Okay,
man?
so
What was going on?
that made it into my piece because I was worried about this because I did a Trace Jackson Davis film room, and I was like, I think that the 75% field goal percentage or at rim percentage of his rookie season is a facade that comes via playing with Curry and Clay and Chris Paul. And I went into the film and I was like, I think he's still going to have some of that short roll hesitancy or like rolling hesitancy that CMB has. The Raptors have not, despite him being a better dunker than CMB, they have not solved their rolling problems sans Pirtle. And then the first roll he gets, Nemhard is standing there and he's like, nope, 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 can't risk it. And I was like, damn.
The same thing happened with Mamu and TJ
Yep.
McConnell. He stopped him at the rim.
Terrible, terrible. Okay, quickly. I just need
Yes,
your
I
thoughts
didn't.
on
I didn't
Emmanuel quickly.
actually answer your question at all. Yeah, so you're asking me if I think Emmanuel Quickley's the long-term point guard of this team. Is that what you're asking
Yeah,
me?
yeah. I'm giving you the tough questions. The front court and
No,
the back court.
I don't. I think at the NBA level, I mean, they've been successful in the minutes when Jamal Shed and Emmanuel Quickley are both out there, I
Yep.
feel. And I think that that's very important. I mean, especially with, some of the ball pressure trend has waxed and waned a little bit this season compared to last when it was really peaking. But the more the ball pressure is there, the more important it is for you to be able to have two people who can run pick and rolls. And I'm sure I'm tainted in part by this because I watch Tyrese Halliburton and Andrew Nemhard, but the Pacers have really missed that this year. They've missed being able to have two of Tyrese, TJ, and Andrew Nemhard on the court at the same time. And like what I said before, I mean, the Raptors are uniquely positioned because obviously Brandon Ingram can run more pick and rolls and other things, but like I like being able to run pick and rolls on both sides of the court where you can shift the nail aptly. But they've closed games obviously with Jamal and Emmanuel Quickley both out there at the same time. I don't like Emmanuel Quickley's playmaking as a lead guard, and I think that his spacing is still valuable to you. So I guess it would depend to me who the point guard that you're trading for would be about who then you would want to be having in that two guard spot. But right now, even though Quickley has shot below expectations, I'm sure he still has gravity out on the court, particularly
Hmm.
when they're running the fraudulent action 77 shallow.
Oh yeah, you wanted to talk about that. It's an absolute staple for the Raptors, particularly with Ingram and Scotty,
And it works
because
all the time and it shouldn't. Do you have a
we
clip of it? Throw the clip up.
I I can try and find a clip, but I guess I'll ask you while I go looking for this. I will ask you, do you find it kind of absurd that the Raptors offense is able to be so good with Jamal Shed being such a big part of it and having 49% true shooting? He is like his statistical profile and the fact that he is as positive as he is I think a completely novel occurrence in the NBA currently. So while I look for a clip, you tell me what you think of that.
Yeah, I mean, I remember on our podcast you told me that Jamal Shed was like modeling his game after TJ McConnell.
He mentioned that this summer,
And in part, we were talking about floater led offense, and I like made a joke and I was like, I don't think TJ's ever even taken a floater. But my favorite play of this basketball game tonight actually involved Jamal Shed. It was my favorite play for the Pacers, though, because Andrew Nemhard got a steal while he was defending Jamal Shed because he realized Jamal Shed barely shoots when he gets into the paint. And I oftentimes wonder why more defenses don't realize how pass first he is. Sometimes even when he's just catching off of spot up opportunities, like, and Andrew Nemhard played off of him. Like, it wasn't a pull the chair, but it was very much like, okay, you're not going to take this shot. I'm going to pull back. And I don't think a lot of teams recognize that readily regular season game to regular season game, but I do wonder what it's going to look like into the playoffs. But I mean, overall, his passing reads, especially in like second side situations, when
Hmm.
he's attacking into a tilted offense, to me have been pretty sublime and what you would
Yep.
want out of a backup point guard. I mean, I think that they have to be very happy. Where did they select him in the second round? What was the pick?
45.
Yeah. I mean, I could do with a little bit less of the uh, Jalen Brunson falling down behind a screen and that being deemed as
I don't like it either.
effective
Yeah.
point of attack defense. But yeah, I mean, Jamal Shed's been a valuable piece for them for sure.
The He gets off the ball at the most optimum moment, a staggering amount of time, which for a guy who has 49% true shooting, that is so important. Anyway, before we move on to the rest of the podcast, you wanted to complain about something you told me beforehand. So we have Shal 77 Shal here. For people who don't know, 77 just refers to a double drag. A double drag is two screeners up top. Obviously, I guess the Pacers with Tyrese have their own little quirk on this. I don't know if you think that one is fraudulent, but please walk me through what you think is happening here.
Yeah, so quickly he's going to cut underneath the pick and roll. So pause it as he's cutting underneath CMB. Okay, stop right there. When you and I were doing playoff coverage of the Pacers against the Milwaukee Bucks, I hope that you will remember that the Milwaukee Bucks were running 77 shallow with Kevin Porter Jr. as the ball handler, AJ Green as the shallow cutter, and Giannis as the screener. And there was a moment between Pascal and Jenny in one of the games because KPJ was just repeatedly getting downhill to the
Hmm.
rim against the Pacers defense. And Jenny was like, Pascal needs to step up and hedge. And Pascal's like, if I step up and hedge, like Giannis is gone. And after that game, I asked you, I go, well, what tweak would you make to that coverage? And you're like, I just think Matherin's got to be better. And I said, I would switch the guards. Like, you got to switch the guards and just treat it as a stack action. And then the next game, the Pacers switched the guards and treated it as a stack action, and the Bucks stopped running it. So to explain to the audio listeners or to the video listeners, what I mean by that is Emmanuel Quickley's defender should hold in the paint until Brandon Ingram starts to turn the corner. The shallow cut defender then jumps onto the ball, and the defender that's on ball defending Brandon Ingram would then peel off and meet Emmanuel Quickley at the 45. More teams, like, effectively that's a next. Like, there's nobody
Hmm.
at the wing because Emmanuel Quickley's making the shallow cut from wing to wing. But there's more teams doing this in the NBA. After the Pacers did that in the playoffs, there's several teams that are just now guard to guarding this. But when I watch the Raptors run it, nobody's ever doing that switch. The Pacers did it in the one game where they got fried by the Raptors at home when they were the very, very injured version of the Pacers, where Andrew Nemhard and Jarris Walker switched it and they immediately turned the water off on it. But there are so often Brandon Ingram's just able to drive and pull up right into that chasm. And there's been some teams now that the Pacers and other teams are switching the guard to guard who will start, pause it right there, where the shallow cutter is now, instead of going out to the wing where they're expected to leak out, they're starting to dart to the rim, which is making those
Hmm.
switches a little bit more difficult. But yeah, I'm not a fan of the 77 shallow. I think it's too easy to take away and to guard. But Emmanuel Quickley just keeps opening up massive chasms of space.
Well, it's even though he is opening up massive chasms of space, he's significantly underperforming his open shooting this year. So
As are
maybe,
most of the Raptors, though.
I mean, oh my days, this team, yeah, they can't shoot a lick.
But on
Um,
the bright side, Mamu did make a three out of a Brandon Ingram double team against the Pacers tonight.
he did
The numbers
something
are
I
turning
was
up.
something I was looking at and deeply curious about is why does Mamu not shoot well with Brandon passing him the ball? He's wide open. Stressed me out, Caitlin, but I'll tell you what, basketball can be stressful. But your choice of beer, Caitlin, it doesn't have to be. Coors Light delivers mountain cold refreshment, people. When the mountains turn blue, the beer is as cold and refreshing as the Rockies. You've heard it once, you've heard it a million times. I'm telling you, it's cold in Toronto. This is the coldest February in like a decade. I've not enjoyed it, but at least it lets me know that Coors Light is telling the truth when they say Coors Light is cold lagered, cold filtered, and cold certified for a smoother finish. Make sure to celebrate responsibly. And of course, you must be of legal drinking age to imbibe. You can find Coors Light near you. Visit CoorsLightShop.ca. What do you think of my salesmanship, Caitlin? Thoughts on how is my pacing as a salesman?
I mean, I imagine that we've probably missed a lot of ads for Coors Light while we've been recording this podcast that we're probably on during the Super Bowl tonight.
That's probably the case. Okay. The last thing we'll talk about before we get out of here, you mentioned the Raptors making defensive adjustments. You and I have talked about it. We talked about it, and then I was close to writing a piece about it, and then their defense got bad again, and then I had to wait a month, and then I finally got to write about the good defense with quotes from a bunch of people about how press was a bit of a scam. I've talked to, it feels like 18 coaches around the league and been like, hey, the press defense is a little bit of a scam, don't you think? And the answer is usually like, yeah, there's value to it, but it's really hard to maintain it. It's really hard to do. What do you make? We talked about the offense. What do you make of the fact that the Raptors defense hangs in every single night, despite having, by most people's estimation, not so much defensive talent?
We might have underestimated it. I mean, I guess I can speak for myself. We might have underestimated some of the individual talent to an extent. Brandon
I'd like
Ingram
to.
Brandon Ingram has looked better than what I expected when we did the preseason pod. Like, he had that possession that was really good tonight against one of Andrew Nemhard's drives that he
Mhm.
walled up. And that's with Andrew Nemhard being very physical driver. So that, and I don't know. Like, I guess I watched a lot of RJ Barrett and Emmanuel Quickley with the Knicks, and I mean, they haven't been, I wouldn't say they're the best defenders on the roster, obviously, but perhaps whenever I was being like, well, if they use this pressure defense and you're only having one ball pressure guard and it gets beat, then it's not as effective as obviously when the Pacers were doing it and literally all 10 players in the rotation are consistently pressuring, because I was underestimating the ability of the other people on the roster. That being said, obviously Darko dialed back the places where they're doing the pressure so that then you are better and more effective when you are doing it. And I think he's been, um, what I want to say here, more prudent against what teams he's doing it versus, because the pressure looked fantastic against the Golden State Warriors when they came back,
That was.
from whatever, how many points down. But Steve Kerr was like inexplicably not playing any ball handlers against it while the Warriors continued to melt down. That's good coaching by Darko. I have some questions for the Warriors, but that aspect of it. But I think even more than anything is it's what I told you whenever I said, when we got asked on our podcast a question about, which team creates the most matchup issues for the Pacers, or an underrated team that does. And I said, it's the Raptors, because they pace control so well. The Raptors, by the numbers, play people deeper into the clock on defense than any team in the league. And I think there's a lot of people talk about random offense. I recorded an entire podcast with Rick about random offense, but there's something to random defense too. And not just your variation of your coverages, but what you're doing within the half court that then can make people somewhat frantic. And
Mhm.
Fred Katz wrote an article about this that I thought was very interesting. It was something that I hadn't really thought about, because I pointed out to you that the Raptors' opponents were vastly underperforming their 3-point shooting percentage, just as the Raptors are underperforming their own. And I was like, that's not going to stay that way. And it hasn't. Like, there's been some, you know, regression to the mean on that. But if it's a lot of late clock grenade threes after you've rotated, you've brought, random doubles. Sometimes they use some other unique coverages that you don't see a lot of teams do. Then maybe teams aren't as confident taking those shots later in the clock than they are at the beginning. And as it turns out, early offense universally is better than late offense. Even bad transition offense is typically, still a good thing that you want to load up on. But the NBA, by 6 seconds of the shot clock, shoots tremendously worse in the final 6 seconds. So given that the Raptors are a team that's choking out the clock more than others, that might be how they're gaming the numbers to their advantage, especially because they know that 3-point shooting is a weakness of theirs. Like, it is a very interesting math problem that they're able to pull off every night. In addition
Yeah.
to the fact that CMB as a rookie is like blowing my mind that he's able to accomplish what he's able to accomplish as a center.
I guess so. I'll quickly say, so I wrote that piece on the Raptors, defense. I had a lot of fun quotes in there, but The big one that got at the heart of everything was I finally got to talk to Darko and he gave me just the I was like, "What changed?" And he said, "We were picking up not just on dead balls, but free throws and made shots. A lot of times we were getting caught out and we weren't ready to establish our defense. Our defense was exposed because of that. It opened up a lot of downhill drives and it hurt us in our transition and in our
Yep.
defense overall. We're trying to be smarter about when to apply it. How does it work if we have more time to go pressure and be up the floor and when it makes sense? We're adjusting to the demands of the game." That is what you said, but in Darko's parlance. They also, I think, talking about random defense, they help a lot. I think the very underrated thing is that Darko has gotten this team to compete as five men. There's, of course, tweaks that are very mindful. Like there is just guys are playing better and guys rotate a little bit quicker. That's something every defense can get
Yep.
from guys 1 through 5. But positioning Brandon more towards the rim because they're a smaller team, especially with Jakob, his block percentage being a career high, him getting more contested rebounds because CMB and Scottie do a lot of boxing out. Brandon with his wingspan, high pointing the basketball, competing, that helps a lot. There's very specific mindful stuff, but the competition is through 1 through 5 of whoever's on the floor. That edge of like we're staying in the play really helps move teams farther back into the clock. I want to stay with CMB. He's the best rookie I've seen on the Raptors. He I can't
Wow.
say
Wow.
I
I'm
can't the
not I'm
best
not disagreeing. I'm just like, wow.
yeah, best rookie defender, right? Is that what I said or just best
You
rookie?
said best rookie.
Oh, okay. Nah, no, I don't think he was better than Scottie was. Sorry, best rookie defender. I got ahead of myself. I was already thinking about comparing him to OG. I didn't have my best analyst cap on at that point in time in like 2017. OG was a really strong rookie defender, but I think CMB is better. And I also have to Trey was the first one to say that out loud, I think, in the market, so I'll give him credit for that one. What do
Credit
you
is important, Trey. You deserve that credit.
That's right. The science, the science. Okay, so Colin Murray Boyles, you had this great little soliloquy that you did on Scottie Barnes turning like a dancer. What does CMB's defense evoke in you?
CMB reminds me of somebody that would be in a movie theater with a flashlight. That's how he constantly plays defense. And I mean, like it was so telling of both players in this game tonight when Jarris took the like turnaround one leg fadeaway with CMB just like totally smothering anything that he wanted to do, like force meeting a movable object. Only the reverse of that was basically what it was. But yeah, I mean, the Raptors in this game, I don't know if it was the play when CMB re injured the thumb or aggravated the thumb. I don't know what they were terming that as. But
Hmm.
I don't know how often they're doing this. You'll have to let me know because I didn't do this in my 25-minute film study yesterday. But the Pacers ran a double drag, just two ball screens in a row for Andrew Nemhard. And CMB was the first screener defender. And they went, which I have not seen a lot of teams do this, they went switch to ice. So CMB switched out to Nemhard and iced the second screener. Tremendous. And it was very like Andrew Nemhard plays that game of staying parallel against ice coverage pretty well to be able to thread and feed the pocket pass into the big. And he deflected that. And I think that's probably like the guy's probably just got too many deflections this year. That might be what's caused this particular thumb injury. Have we discovered and done any science about that? But like that's a coverage I haven't seen a lot of teams even try. Like it's not the first time any team's ever done it, but you don't see a lot of teams try it because there's not a lot of players at the 4 or the 5 position that have that degree of hip flexibility to jump out and switch and flip to get back to the screener and then funnel that ball handler into a crowd and then be up in the crowd and be able to do what he's able to do in passing lanes. In some respects, we talk about 3-level scores. He's kind of a 3-level defender
Yeah,
already as a rookie.
yeah. The big thing that when I was going over his film, because obviously he was the guy I wanted the Raptors to draft, I thought he was a top 5 prospect in this draft, and I was overjoyed when they selected. I was surprised and overjoyed. Uh, I had to do a lot of work trying to figure out how he would make his offense work and understanding that he would have to do so much problem solving because of the limitations of his game because he doesn't necessarily have the skill set of like a 3 man, but he also was inevitably going to run into some finishing, blockades when he was playing the front court in the NBA. We've seen that manifest. I do think he has the touch and the physicality to get over the hump, but his defense was immediate. It was a flashlight in my eyes. It was, oh my God. And the play that really sold me on him was Jeremiah Fears. I didn't think he was the best guard in the draft, but he may have been the best ball handler in the draft, and he may have been the quickest player in the draft. He tried to get over a screen, and CMB jumped him. This was South Carolina versus where the hell was Fears playing at? Oklahoma. And he jumped him and moved him parallel and back about 8 feet, just slid him across and then mugged him and stole the ball. And then he did it like 3 times. And I was like, this is an NBA guard for sure. This is a guy who will be quick at the NBA level. And he had no recourse. And then went to training camp, and RJ said, oh my God, as a rookie, I can't believe this. And then Scottie said, yeah, being guarded by him is kind of something else. And then CMB said, yeah, there's nothing they can do about it. I said, what the hell? This guy's 20? What's going on? It has been, I think, a real treat to watch how quickly he moves his feet and how viciously his hands become striking vipers. He's fun.
Striking vipers. That's a pretty special analogy right there. I like that one.
Well, it's also like, that too is what you said. What's causing the hand injury? I do wonder if some players.
Not to interrupt, I'm now reminded of the shrieking eels from The Princess Bride.
Yes, and the punch. Oh man. Anyway, so excellent. Yes, but some trainers, they really do think about trying to move players away from some of those styles, which I think is so interesting because, you want to play that style because it's good for your team and you're great. But then trainers, they're not for you. They're not for the Raptors. They're not for the Pacers. And they might tell you like, you might get injured more playing this way. Why don't we dial that back? And I've always wondered about like the fall off you see in players' defense. It's always attributed to like workload elsewhere. But I think the soft thing underpinning this in the NBA is trainers and teams being like, this is not conducive to health overall, and you're good enough to get paid regardless. You don't have to be busting up your hand all the time. I hope for like the viewer in me that CMB maintains this verve of attack defensively for as long as he can. And I, of course, hope he's healthy, of course, too. But he's a treat.
You can count on watching the Raptors and saying, like, I don't know how you refrain from it. I'd be wanting to write, like, look, Scottie Barnes is awesome at defense. Look, Scottie Barnes is awesome at defense. Again, look what CMV did tonight. It would be very hard not to just be incredibly repetitive with the work I was putting out.
I do have trouble with that. Yes. Every time I do film, I'm like, well, I could put some of Scottie's defense in here. Like, this is absurd. Like, there's like 4 guys in the NBA who can do this. And that's kind of like the defensive player of the year pitch. The numbers, I think, would lean heavily towards Rudy Gobert, just the raw impact stuff. If Wemby doesn't miss another game, I think he'd be a shoo-in. But you start getting into the other guys, and like there's probably fatigue around Rudy. You look at the fact that Scottie does contest as many shots per synergy, as many shots per game at the rim as guys like Wemby and Rudy. You look that he is a positive rim defender. And then you also see that because the Raptors, yes, they want to chase and do all this stuff. Scottie has this homework of being a full closeout guy on top of all of that and doing it like above the 90th percentile in the NBA. And that he is also paying great attention to scouting reports, turning down like desired actions and fighting guys every inch of the court. And he's the stocks leader. It's just like, whoa, man. It's really hard not to overstate what he's doing. I think without any hesitation, he's the best defender I've seen the Raptors have. He's better now than Kawhi was when they won the championship. I don't know about in the playoffs, but in the regular season, he's got it with a bullet.
I won't. It's not for me to say. This is like when people tell me things about the NFL, and I'm just like, you're the expert. I can't counter you. You could probably tell me anything, and I'd be like, "Yep, I didn't see enough of." I mean, I watched the Raptors obviously during their championship run, but I did not see enough of Kawhi during the regular season to say which of them has the edge. I can just say that from what I have seen this season, Scottie Barnes has been especially special, and especially in the games against the Indiana Pacers. So
He is a game plan disruptor against your team, our team, our team. He's a. These are my two teams.
well, I actually will add one thing. He is a game plan disruptor in general. Like I don't know if it's entirely that he watches tons of film or if the coaching staff is really preparing him for what sets the other team's going to run. Because I showed it to Samson, and I know he played this clip on his podcast for another reason. But I watched them play the Clippers on the opening play. I was watching film of Zubats for reasons that should now be made clear and obvious as to why I was doing so. And the Clippers run like Nicholas Batum comes up and turns the angle on a screen to get James Harden into a handoff with a pin down in the middle. And Scottie knew that turn screen was coming. Like they disguise the action. You don't need to completely understand the machinations here. The Clippers disguised the action, and Scottie knew it was coming, called it out and denied it twice, and then completely face guarded James Harden from ever even being able to get the ball, while he was also directing traffic to Brandon Ingram and other people out there. So opening possession of the game, the Clippers get nothing. And coaching staffs think a lot about what play they're going to run and for what reasons they're going to run it at the start of a game, what pressure points they want to put out there against their opponent. So I notice him doing that a lot. Like it's not even just what he does with the stocks and the blocks. It's also like there's clearly an amount of film study going on from the Toronto Raptors against opponents.
Yeah. He's an aggressive and malevolent truffle pig, hunting out any action he can.
We're really pulling out a lot of stuff here. We're the truffle pigs of metaphors.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, what in this job? I mean, what else? I recently had a conversation with someone who said that they prefer concise things, and I said yes, I understand why, but I also like the exploration of can I find the perfect thing while in speech. The effort is palpable, whereas when written, you don't see the effort that goes into crafting something. Whereas the podcast version is you and I batting the ball back and forth, like
you see the struggle, and you hear all the ums and mispronunciations of names and words.
The struggle is worth something, you know. Are there any other, before we get out of here, are there any, you said the Raptors do a lot of fun things on defense. Is there anything else that you think is worth noting for the listeners?
Keep an eye on the switch to ice. I mean, tonight I was curious by how often Emmanuel Quickley was flat out top blocking Jarris Walker, and the fact that Jarris Walker wasn't doing anything against it. But I mean, it was a curious coverage because it wasn't like Jarris was the stack screener, and that happened a few times. And I mean, he completely prevented him from getting the ball. I thought the Pacers should have taken advantage of that matchup a little better than they did. But yeah, they do some curious things.
They, if they were truly an elite offensive team, I think we'd get more conversation about their defense being. Well, actually, if they were a really strong offensive team, their defense would probably be top 3 because they'd be defending in the half court.
If they're a really strong offensive team, you might be like, "Ooh, could this be a sneaky playoff upset team?"
Yeah. Well, that was yeah. They would be talked about. People would be going in a little bit further. Obviously, you mentioned Fred. Obviously, a bunch of people in our market attempt to do so, but you might get the Zach Lowe descend upon Toronto. What's going on here? And even if Zach doesn't necessarily pull all the same like film gems as maybe Fred would, like he could, but maybe he doesn't. You know that the quotes around the team are going to be much better for a guy like Zach, so you always get like a little bit more there. It's cool when the big wigs come, then you get the real quotes about what's going on, because a lot of other times it's just kind of like, played hard, which is, it's its own thing. Is there anything you want to say before we get out of here, Caitlin?
I'll just say, if you come over to my podcast, which you shouldn't do, you should be watching this one because obviously you're fans of the Raptors, not the Pacers and the other things that I do. But if you look up in the corner, there's a pretty big ad sponsor up there. I don't have that going on, so should tell you about the quality of the show that you're watching.
You think the Coors Light advertisement is the chasm between Basketball She Wrote and Raptors Republic?
Mm-hmm.
Coors Light would sponsor. I'll talk to them. Would you like to sponsor Caitlin and I, the Basketball She Wrote? Honestly, considering I don't get into politics really. I know you probably think I do on your podcast, but I don't really. But I get into politics so easily on my own podcast that I feel like Coors Light would be like, Hey, that's great. Like Trey and I had a like keep protesting ice conversation on our podcast, and I was like, well, I hope Coors Light is so. Basketball She Wrote would probably be a very welcome addition to the catalog.
They that word can have more than one meaning. Who knows what Coors Light thought that it meant?
Yeah, true. Yeah, they thought this was a beverage conversation. You don't
You
want to
haven't
taint your.
said many political things on mine. I don't really remember many instances of this.
Maybe
I said a
it's just
somewhat
the.
political thing by complaining about the movie Hoosiers, and that was deemed like political, even though I'll say here in the safety of Canada that Hoosiers is a very bad basketball movie.
I guess. I mean, you were in the exact market for people to be like, "What do you mean?
It's
I
bad.
love that movie."
Coaching people that they have to take 4 passes no matter what is bad. The basketball product was bad. There's racial undertones, and we're supposed to root for a coach who, at the beginning of the movie, you find out got fired because he hit a kid. And this is like the hero of the film that we're supposed to root for. It's not good. I did relate to it because I did grow up a coach's kid in Indiana, but then when I watched it as an adult, I was like, what in the world? Like, this was a movie I once liked? Eye-opening stuff.
What was the most offensive? The fact that he hit kids, or that you needed to pass the ball 4 times?
Probably the racial undertones.
There you go. For anybody who enjoyed listening and was astounded, like I know most people listen to this podcast when they see Caitlin will be like, "Ooh, rejoice, Caitlin again." Very familiar with her work. But if you're just being introduced now, or even if you are well aware, let me say, you can go to Basketball She Wrote, the Patreon support. It is singular coverage of not just the Pacers, of course, but the NBA. You will learn things about basketball that you will not learn anywhere else. You won't learn it from me. I'm here to tell you. I'm good at my job. I know I am. It's true. Don't interrupt this. Listen, my podcast, right? You won't learn it from me. A lot of this stuff, there's only one place you can get it. Caitlin is singular, and thus so is her work novel. Thanks. I grabbed it again.
The amount
Thanks,
of
everyone.
lotion sightings that have been in this pod. It's totally product placement. There'll be another ad up in the left corner by the next episode.
I would, if they gave me money, I would for this company.
At the end of this pod, I want to know what your skincare routine is.
I believe it or not, Caitlin, I've answered this question on a mailbag. I've answered the skincare question on a mailbag. As funny as that is. But okay, thank you everybody for tuning in with us. We appreciate you very much. Basketball She Wrote, Patreon, Raptors Public. You can like, comment, subscribe, hype, all that good stuff that helps on YouTube. We appreciate you. And whether you got into this in the morning or at night, have a blessed day and goodbye.